This is Germination, a Resident Evil fanfiction about viral research, keeping secrets, and the mindset of the wonderful people who work for monsters, making monsters. This story was written by Ian Connell, and is narrated by Ian Connell, Tony Lepaco, Natalie Lepaco, and Peter Snell. This story is fiction. All resemblance to persons past and present, and all reference to historical events, is for effect, and not for the purpose of defamation, revisionist history, or for use in your culture studies paper that is due tomorrow. From the Hunting Journal of Winston Bell, August 8th, 1966. This morning we crossed the river. I was sure the trucks would get stuck, but Luazi found a shallow rock bed, and we miraculously made it, with a good fast start. Luazi said the river is a natural boundary between Ndipaya and Ndipaya land. I asked him if the government recognizes the line. He didn't know. I wondered if we would see markings, like in other tribal haunts. But though great trees hung their shelves of foliage over us and drank from the river, I saw nothing man-made for miles. Then around noon we were close to people again. First we saw cow crap and human footprints. Then small huts appeared on a path leading up a hill. We left the trucks. Luazi walked first, holding his hands out in a show of peaceful tidings. People came out of their huts, and others out of the forest. They called to one another. Soon we met people in bright colors and beads and bones. Children ran around mostly naked. I would not have been able to tell the Ndipaya apart from any other tribe until Price asked out loud, "Is that a topaz?" He pointed at a woman's headdress, and in it was a big, bright yellow gem. The closer we looked, the more we realized many of the Ndipaya had gemstones in headdresses and staves and chest pieces made from links of bone. We were led up the road by perhaps 50 or even 100 people, mostly women and children. Not many men. Must have been out hunting or watching the cattle, I thought. The children circled our group excitedly. I noticed blocks here and there in the path, worn and ancient, but clearly cut for a city road ages ago. The stones became more frequent as we approached the village. Over the village loomed the ruins of a gray stone temple, not unlike the one I saw in Mexico as a boy. This one was perhaps 2 stories tall, and must have had a functional interior at one time. Suddenly I realized the crowd, now grown to several hundred, had stopped, as though an imaginary line was drawn, and only myself and my party continued on toward the temple. A priestess emerged, dark as night and gorgeous, her hair cut short, a snake coiled around her arm, the skin of a black leopard covering her legs. She held out her arm, and we stopped as though we too were her subjects. For a moment we waited, and Luazi held up his hands. Then a flash of light overtook me. I covered my eyes as I discerned that somebody was reflecting light into my face. I reached for my rifle, but in the seconds until the sunspots shrunk, 6 tall warriors closed on us, with bows and spears ready. I drew a bead on the nearest warrior, but kept my eye on the woman. Then she spoke. Her voice was deep, almost as deep as a man's. "Follow her," Luazi said. We were led through the temple to a circular stone terrace. A small water basin made of stone sat in the center. Beyond, the land ended in a cliff overlooking a vast lake, much of it marsh. It was beautiful, but most of my attention was on the men with pointy things and angry expressions, and they, for some reason, were most preoccupied with watching Luazi. Luazi tried to speak to the woman, but 2 of the warriors put spear points to his throat. I wished then that I had my pistol in hand and not the rifle. But Luazi had the .45, and I left the spare in the truck. Smart. After a tense moment, a white woman ran into the confrontation. It was Dr. Brunet, the Italian anthropologist. She was tanned so dark that at first glance I thought she was a Ndipayan, but the brown skirt and the denim shirt and the big gardener's hat said otherwise. Dr. Brunet said she would intervene on our behalf. Luazi never mentioned that we were in trouble, and I was confused. Suddenly Spencer stepped forward. He asked Dr. Brunet to ask if we might be guests of the Ndipaya. He could pay, he said, and provide the Ndipaya with something they need. Dr. Brunet ignored him and asked what we were doing in the area. Spencer said hunting, of course, but he wished to hear the legend of the Sun King too. The priestess said the legend belonged to the Ndipaya and their friends only. So obviously she must have told Dr. Brunet, but she wasn't going to tell Spencer. She said we could hunt the lands to the west, as long as we promised not to go north, and not to take more than 2 animals a day. If we went north, where her people were, we would be killed and burned in offering. Then she left, and Dr. Brunet dismissed us. I had to drag Spencer away by the arm. He called me a real dirty name. Good thing the local kiddos don't speak rich jerk. Spencer fumed as we walked out of there. I assured him the hunting would still be good, and we could ask somebody else about the legend. He suddenly pointed into a small stone hut. Small game cooked in the center of the room, smoking, but most unusually, it was cooking in a beam of light. We stopped to look, and we saw no fire beneath the spit. Spencer smiled broadly. "I think these people understand the sun better than the scientists in America," he said. Marcus squawked in disagreement. We left the village, and the warriors disappeared again. Spencer wanted to head north just as soon as we got back to the truck. He insisted on getting a sample of the Sonnentreffer. I told him the priestess had decided. If he had a problem, he could deal with the hundreds of warriors we did not see, but deal with them by himself. For the first time ever, he didn't argue, but he still looked furious. Now we are camped on Ndipayan land. Tonight we're eating lion. Brandon shot it as it napped on the side of a trail. They taste horrible, but it was that or canned soup. I can tell we're being watched. All I had to do was glance at Loazi to get a nod confirming it. I hope Spencer will change his mind. August 9th, 1966. Spencer is a moron. Last night he nearly got us all killed, and now we have big problems. I was tired when I took my first bit of rest. It was Spencer's watch. Apparently, Loazi was sleeping too, because our guests managed to sneak away in the small truck. I've never had a group do that. We tracked them in the dark in the big blue truck. It's not hard to see where an off-road truck is going in tall grass. Then we lost them on a flatter patch about 2 miles north, when the moon disappeared. Then we heard rifle reports. We drove to the sounds with our rifles ready, and found the trio hiding behind the little truck. They said they were attacked as they drove, and they fired at shadows. I saw spears and arrows stuck in the trees and the ground around them. I asked when the attack stopped. Once the gunfire began, Spencer said. He was angry about the attack, as if it wasn't his fault. The spears were obviously deliberate misses. None of them was even close to the guy's final position. I told Spencer it was a warning, and we were heading back to Trunduzu immediately, and dissolving our contract. He refused. "We have a right to cultivate that flower," Spencer said. "Humanity has a right. It could be nothing, or it could hold a cure for cancer. Either way, science is the path, and I won't be thwarted because you think the chances are impossible. Too many children die because some selfish cult holds a tremendous resource dear to heart." I wonder if he was elbowing me or the Ndipaya with that last part. Either way, high hypocrisy. I am sure he thinks the flower is worth a mint. Also, he was buddies with people who didn't think children were above experimenting on. Marcus, on the other hand, is probably crazy enough to want to research it for its own sake. But now I know the whole hunting trip was a front for this foolish adventure. "So trade for the flower," I said. "Go back to the village and make an offer." Spencer growled something, but I didn't care what it was. I put Loazi behind the wheel of the small truck, and I drove the big blue truck. Big Blue got stuck as I turned around, and while we winched it to a stump in the dark, Spencer and his buddies grabbed the little truck again and headed north. It took us 48 profanity-heavy minutes to winch the truck out of the rut. We caught up to them at a rocky outcrop on a hill by midday. They didn't have the truck. "It's stuck in a mud patch," Spencer said. Which is wonderful when up here we're at a 50-to-1 ratio to the lions, let alone the Ndipayan warriors. I have no map of this area, so I don't know where the nearest village even is. But what's worse is the Ndipaya left a sign for us. A piece of hide with 5 dead white guys and 1 dead green guy. I'm not sure why Loazi is green. Below, arms outstretched to the sun, is another stick figure, this one purple. A sun circles all of the figures. Spencer really finds it exquisite. He rolled it up to carry it home, and he says he prizes it more than any lion. I told him they can keep going north at their own peril. Brandon is clearly worried. He got roped into the wrong bunch of rich opportunists, and I don't think they understand that if you're going to be a mustached colonialist, then you have to bring a lot of troops. I asked Brandon to return with us, but he refused to leave Dr. Marcus. Loazi and I are driving back to the Ndipaya village to ask for safe passage out of here. August 10th, 1966. Dr. Brunet, if you find this journal, please explain to the nice Ndipaya that although we shot some of their warriors, it was because I wanted to save Brandon from the other idiots. My conscience got the best of me. I had to pull him out of there. Call it redemption for some bad decisions in the war, or guilt for not remedying the bad decisions of other pompous old men, or call it playing dad. My judgy sister Teresa would say it's that, but I had to get Brandon out of there. We spent the rest of the day freeing the little truck. Then I tried to send Loazi home in it, but he laughed and said he would become lion food if he didn't come with me. I doubt that. We were almost halfway back to the village when the guilt won me over and we reversed course. We were tired and ate beans in the trucks, straight from the can. Spencer's group was caught on the bank of the big lake, pinned, firing into the shadows that whooped back at them excitedly. One of the group was screaming in pain. I could hear Spencer shout at him to be quiet. The Austrian accent came back for that. As we crept closer, we found none of the Ndipaya standing security. They shot arrows in a line facing the beach. I wanted to scare them off somehow until one of them pointed at us. I lifted my rifle and shot. In an instant, Loazi shot too, and we emptied our clips. We killed 5 and the other dozen dispersed quickly. Now I had damned Loazi too, and relations with the Ndipaya will never be the same. God damn you, Spencer. When we approached the group, Spencer was thrilled. He hailed us like we had just sent him home on a home run. Norman Price took an arrow through his right thigh and was sobbing. Brandon looked like he was ready to cry. Dr. Marcus watched everyone with wide eyes, shaking like a dog during a storm. I cussed them all out severely for 1 minute, then told them to get ready to move. Price would have to be carried, and I suggested Spencer and Brandon carry him. Then Spencer suggested we leave him behind. I seized him by the throat. I told him we won't be leaving Price behind, and that if he didn't move on my orders and stay in front of me, I would put a bullet through his puffed-up head. I could see hate in his eyes. I bet he hadn't been handled like that since throwing caviar at his private school. We tried heading south before dark, but Loazi said he watched the Ndipaya warriors regroup that way with a head count of at least 30. To the north we could see another cliff overlooking the lake, perhaps not as tall, but enough to give us range with our rifles. In the moonlight I saw a warrior standing on it, a great and tall man with a big spear, silent and ready, but I decided we would take the hill anyway. I sent Loazi and Brandon first, and told them to shoot anything that wasn't us. The hill was a trap, but Loazi sprang it like a ranger. While he ducked away from arrows behind the last tree up the hill, Brandon and I sent lead at our attackers. After we took the hill, we watched for movement across the plain in the moonlight. I found the retreating warriors in my scope, but I could not pull the trigger. I can hear old Sergeant Holliday screaming at me for being a numbnut, spineless coward. I hope I don't regret it. August 11th, 1966. This morning we jumped some men for their 3 canoes. We spied them from the hill. Loazi and I talked it over rapidly while hiding in the brush. We decided that if we could get the canoes, we could cross the lake and head for Ufasu and catch a train from there. The alternative was to stay and fight the whole Ndipayan tribe. I thought Spencer would resist. Instead, he was overenthusiastic. "There are our canoes," he exclaimed. "Our canoes!" I told Spencer not to shoot, and Loazi surprised the men and told them to march to the south. They had great and empty containers, some with feathers in them, so I suspect they were carrying or trading food somewhere. Another village, perhaps, and one that might not be Ndipaya. I hope there's a doctor in Ufasu. I can't decide if I will tell the police the whole story, or just flee the country after I shoot Spencer. Last night, after the battle, I managed to staunch the bleeding on Price's leg, but I'm not a medic, and I can't tell if he's poisoned or in shock or what. This morning he looks okay. Shaky and not pleased with his boss, but okay. Still, he must be taken to a hospital soon. We took the canoes to the northwest, away from the Ndipaya, we hoped. We paddled for miles until we saw the opposite side. Cliffs rose well above the water. I hoped to see power lines, but got trees and vines instead. There was no place to land, but there was a tall cave in the cliff. We paddled closer in silence. When we reached the cave mouth, Ndipayan warriors appeared from inside. I was surprised, maybe still angry that we were still fighting them at all, but Loazi had the good sense to shoot right away. After one warrior dropped, the others fled. Spencer guided his canoe into the cave. Dr. Marcus and Brandon were with him. I had Price, and Price begged us to follow. "What about your goddamn leg?" I asked. "We have antibiotics with us," he said, and he claimed he would be fine. Not likely. The cave was a wonder. 40 or 50 feet tall in places, lit by the reflected sunlight off the still water, bats pouring out above. Farther in, we found a tunnel lit by a continuous fissure in the rock above, a fissure that extended up to let in sunlight. I told Spencer if he wanted to go exploring, now was his chance, and that Luazi and I would be going back to find a route to Efasu. We had our shot at surviving. Then Spencer took off his hat, reached inside, and threw me the contents. $10,000 in a brick of 100s. I could have another 10,000 if I helped him explore the cave, he said. He said the Ndipayans revere this place, and he believed the flower was here, or close by. He wasn't guessing. At this point, he wasn't so excitable as determined, and I knew that we had arrived exactly where he wanted to start searching. That goddamn flower. Or I should say, that goddamn money, because that's what got me here, and it keeps me here. I've been paid 10,000 for an elephant once, but that was split between about 40 people on supplies. This time I stopped and listened to that devil. I agreed to help him. Part of me felt nervous about Price's health. Not to mention, now we will be poking around on sacred territory. Everything says get out. If I make it through this, I think I'm going to be a monk or a pastor somewhere, but anywhere outside of Africa. In a minute, we're heading into the cave. August 12th, 1966. I am trapped in an old room in the ruins we found in the cave. I should be saying a Hail Mary and not writing. Somewhere out there, that thing is still crawling around. I don't have my guns, and all the ammunition is spent anyway. I have my flashlight, but it'll die soon. The ruins are huge, an underground city hidden from the world, and sheltered from the heat, with just enough sun let in from the fissures above. All stone structures and tombs, built several stories tall, with stone bridges spanning great chasms, wooden ladders leading to upper and lower platforms, and many windows. Space for at least 50,000 people, I would guess, maybe more. Carvings of leopards and other beasts adorn many entrances. Jeweled war masks hang from spears, and looming over everything, atop the tallest monoliths, great transparent stones that Marcus called sunlight refractors. Young Ndipayan warriors guarded the city. That's where the canoes were going, to bring them food. Now, thanks to us, they don't have to. What a waste. They fought bravely, and clearly had drilled their tactics, but a little fire discipline and superior weaponry was enough to drive them back, again and again. There were also traps. Price tried to walk on his own. Spencer made him walk in front, so we don't leave him behind. But Spencer is an evil and cold SOB. He knew something nasty was ahead. A boulder the size of an elephant thundered in and crushed Price against a wall. His arm twitched and the rest of him was a gory mess that slowly drained to the floor. After that, Spencer mysteriously wised up and caught on to a falling door and another boulder trap. Ndipayan warriors ambushed us 3 times. The last time, Luazi took a spear through his ribs and then fell into a river below. I shot the hell out of the man who got him, blasting apart the ancient bricks until I connected with his head. Spencer was useful for once and shot most of the others. I called out to Luazi, his name echoing through the whole underground city, sending bats up out of the chambers, but Luazi didn't answer. God rest my African friend. Then we met a trap unlike the others. It directed a beam of sun that set even the rock alight. I don't think NASA has anything like that. It was right out of the movies. Spencer figured them out and walked us through them. I will admit he is cunning. If there's something cruel to be done to another person, he understands it like a mechanic understands an engine. And finally we arrived at a garden full of those awful red flowers. There's something about them, something primal and sinister about the shape and the color, like looking at the exposed sinew of a man. You know just by looking at them that, like all things so bright and aggressive, they are not to be touched. Spencer dropped his rifle and danced, kicking his feet and throwing his hands to the sky like the evangelicals I grew up with in Mississippi. Dr. Marcus ran into the flowers and picked one. He held it up in the sun and stared like he had found God. Brandon stood behind him, alternately watching the flower and then watching me. I was furious, and I shot my shotgun in the air. "We lost 2 men for a bunch of flowers," I said. "This feels like their funeral, and you are dancing. Get your samples. We move out in 5 minutes. If you don't, this is going to be our funeral place too." But Spencer smiled his smug smile as he stood at the center of the garden. A sunbeam fell over him as he approached, and he almost looked empathetic, if I didn't know that was impossible. "Belle," he said. "Winston, I could hand you all the gems of these ruins, like those you stowed in your pocket." I had pocketed a rough diamond the size of an eyeball in the ruins. They were all over the place. "But all the gemstones in the world," Spencer went on, "all the gold, all the trade and interest, all the slings and arrows, they are nothing compared to this room." "Maybe to a lonely botanist," I said, but he insisted on explaining. If I ever watched a man's ego take possession of his body, it was then and there. "Rebirth is in this room. Dr. Marcus knows it. I can feel it. It's special. What makes man know his own mind? Don't give me those daft theological fumblings. We adjust, but within this room is malleability, survival, adaptation," Spencer said. "So you actually believe that ghost story?" I shouted. "You think that a magic flower is going to make you live forever?" "My friend Edward Ashford believes it. His father Charles believed it when he told the story. You haven't heard all of it, Winston. There's more to it, more that only knowing Charles could reveal," Spencer said. Insane. I followed this asylum escapee. Who let him out of his straitjacket? Who let me out of mine? "Grab some flowers and we're leaving. It's a wonder we aren't all wriggling on a pike right now," I told them. Spencer and Marcus balked some more. Brandon put his hand on my shoulder. He said the flower, Dr. Marcus believed, contained a virus, very possibly the virus that changed man from ape ages ago. Its secrets were vast, and its potential infinite. The genetic coding, the math that assembles the soul of man from the component parts of a beast, was in this room, in these flowers. To own it was to have the code of infinite life. They would take samples and test the flowers. What they really needed was seeds, so Marcus began collecting immediately. "Hurry up," was all I said. I sipped water and lit a cigarette as I watched the thick pollen float through the sunbeams. Then we heard a roar come from the passage we had not yet explored. It was at least as loud as a lion's. Spencer told me to guard the door, and I laughed. He was clearly enraged that I wouldn't follow orders, so I set my hand on my revolver and told him to watch. Brandon interceded and said he would watch, but Marcus said he needed Brandon to handle the samples, so Spencer and I had a staring contest. Then the roar happened again, and the ruins shook. Dust tumbled down the brim of my hat. Something big was close by. I told Spencer we should probably find out what is ahead. Brandon wanted to come. Marcus definitely did not want to come. His trousers were wet. "We came to hunt lions, so don't look so alarmed," I teased him. Spencer barked something at him, and he reluctantly retrieved his rifle. Spencer led us through more ruins, and then across a rope bridge over a round chasm, at least a football field in diameter. I wondered who had to climb around this to build the bridge, or how they got this rope, its fibers thick and gnarly. I wondered if I would fall. This connected to more ruins with a great stone double door. The roar sounded behind the door, and this time I was sure it was bigger than a lion. I suggested we turn around now and get to the canoes. But Spencer readied the elephant gun and made Brandon swing open the door. A great room with an upper story lay behind it. When I think of it now, it's probably the throne room from that rich hunter's tale. Nobody was in there. A massive plant hung on the ceiling. It had a purple flower at least the size of a redwood canopy. The plant let out vines. The vines dropped a seed pod on the floor. It was as big as a mud hut. The seed pod opened, and a man sat there. A white man wearing tribal garb and a whole lot of gold jewelry. He looked like an Olympian after competing, red and shining wet. He stood up and wondered at us, and us at him. "Everyone, this is Milton Sherwin," Spencer said. Sherwin's roar made my ears ring worse than a round of artillery.
From the account of Bariki Stevens, son of Lawazi. My father returned maybe a week or so after he left. He was covered in mud. His clothes had big tears and a lot of blood. He clutched his ribs when he stopped walking. He hugged us briefly and wanted to hug Mama, but she was so angry with him that he could not get near her. "I have seen the king," he said. "The king of the Ndipaya. He is a man without death. If he had seen me, I would not be here." Father went off to speak with men from the village. Work stopped for the day. Everybody was so excited to see him, but then the eyes of the adults were wide with fear. Father had unearthed an abomination. He was cursed, Coco said. "You do not meet the Sun King and return to the world of the living." She said nothing after that for many days, and her face was sad. The next day, Father got his shovel. He dug a big hole in our backyard. I wondered whose dog could be so big that it needed a hole like that. But he dug up a crate. He forced it open with the shovel, and inside were weapons. Weapons, I later realized, from his time as a radical with the Tanganyika African National Union, TANU. He never said if he ever used them on the British, but he must have stolen them from the British. Later, Father headed out again without a word. He carried something big on his back. It was a pipe made in America. It was another thing I would not know until my army years. My father disappeared with a bazooka on his back.
Winston Bell's Journal, August 12th, 1966. That thing is closer. They called it Milton, but it doesn't behave like a Milton. It sniffs. I don't know if it can smell me or what. It cries like a child. It roars. It speaks sometimes, mostly words I don't understand, but some that I do, like totem and kifula and meat. It has all of eternity to scratch at the walls and peek around corners. It will find me. When it first attacked us, it picked me. It threw its stone chair at me. I dove, and the chair went through the wall. Then it charged at us. It nearly seized Brandon, and would have snapped him apart, but Spencer's shot saved him. The report rumbled the hall and shook the dust from the ceiling. I know now why Spencer brought the elephant gun along. He must have known who or what was waiting. He really believed everything about the African ghost from the start, which is impossible as the thing itself, and as impossible as what happened next. The 3 inches long, 1 inch diameter bullet failed to kill it. It put a hole the size of a cantaloupe in the man's chest, and he bled like a burst oil drum. But after he fell over, he stood up from the ground, and the wound closed over with bright red flesh. The others ran away, Dr. Marcus screaming in terror. But I didn't. Rangers don't run. I led the thing away from them, and when the last of my bullets lodged in his chest, I crossed back over the bridge. When the thing followed, sprinting like a teenage boy, I cut the bridge ropes, and down it fell. Without a scream, not even a concerned look on his face. Scariest face I've ever seen. Back when Private Tudor burned to death in a tank, his crazy eyes haunted me for weeks. These eyes were worse. Inside the ruins, my way was blocked by rubble. Somebody deliberately smashed a wall. Spencer is a monster. He won this round. Even if I die, though, I know something he doesn't. You reap what you sow. Sometimes it takes a long time. This is me reaping what I sowed for wanting money more than what matters. But Spencer will get his just desserts, too. I tried to dig through the rubble, but it has to be several yards deep. Then I heard the thing screaming somewhere. I'm cut off, so I hid. I will hide this journal here. One of those idiots dropped his gun back on the street of this ancient city. Maybe I can have a few words with that thing before the end. God bless. Hope I end up in the good place. Sorry for everything. Hope to see you soon, Mom.
From the Anthropological Journal of Dr. Maria Brunet, August 16th, 1966. What's all this talk today of the new king? For the first time, the Queen has invited me into the heart of the old city. They will not say much, but that the old king has returned to the sun. I thought he was a spectral legend, a god figure to whom they paid private and secretive tribute. Today I will find out. I have waited many years for this, and somehow it seems feckless now. August 24th, 1966. There's a garden here, in the old city, and the Ndipaya will not let me get too close to the flowers. But it is magnificent. The irrigation system is complex and nearly as wondrous as the flowers. I feel alive and content here for the first time since childhood, when at church I could also feel the saints close by. But I also found 2 heads on pedestals. I thought they were clay sculptures at first. It was only when I touched one and ants came running out that I realized. The heads belonged to 2 men from that tiny safari group. What happened here? When I asked the queen, she said they met the Sun King and he passed judgment on them. But I thought the Sun King was dead. Is there a new Sun King? She would not say more. She told me to wait in the garden. Ahead was the throne room, but she would not allow me in there. Later, she offered me the kifula. She said I could take my chance first, before her, and that she would honor me should I receive the blessing of the light. But I did not understand what the kifula is, and she was very vague in her explanation. She said the kifula had to taste the blood of the mighty, and if it tasted just, then the new Sun King would ascend. I declined and said I just wanted to go on watching the rituals taking place around here. September 4th, 1966. I hear gunshots coming from inside the ruins. Something is happening. Is it the government? How did they find this place?
Hey, thanks for listening to Chapter 2 of Resident Evil Germination. Chapter 3 is on the way.